Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this brilliant careers talk, or all about modern construction, innovation in construction, and also how we can support sustainable construction. So I'm pleased to introduce Luke, who's joining us from Galliford to share lots about his career journey and also some of the amazing projects that he's been working on and what that can look like for our future. So Luke, I'd love to hand over to you. Just before I do, if I just let everybody know, if you have any questions for Luke, please pop them in the chat functionality or share your appreciation via the reaction or the emojis. That would be great. Thanks, Luke.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Maria. It's lovely to be here with you today, this afternoon. My name is Luke Winch. I am the carbon manager for Galliford Try. I'm also a chartered engineer. Galliford Try are a tier 1 principal contractor working in the construction industry. So a little bit about me. When I was at school, I really enjoyed maths and physics and a few other things like bits of geography and things like that, which obviously kind of suited well for engineering. I kind of plumbed in my A-levels into like a tool online, and it kind of suggested civil engineering as a sort of career for me. I went and researched it, and yeah, it sounded really exciting. So for those who don't know, civil engineering and civil engineers contributes to building and creating and maintaining and enhancing the built environment all around us. So everything really that you see that's man-made and that's constructed, civil engineers will have had some hand in developing. So, for example, you may think about high-rise commercial buildings that an architect would design that, and that you're absolutely right. But then we'd have a structural engineer who would do all the calculations and design the structure to ensure that it can stand and withstand the loading, that's put on the structure. And then if we think about infrastructure, and particularly, so I work a lot in the road sector at the moment, so creating and constructing roads and maintaining and enhancing roads. That's very heavily, civil engineers are heavily involved in the design and the construction of that infrastructure. And then other things like flood defences and water and everything really that you can think about in terms of the built environment, civil engineers are involved with. So just before I started my university course, and I'll talk a bit further down the line about sort of all the different routes and pathways into construction and into civil engineering. And I started university back in 2013, and really we've seen a real transformation in the industry in that short space of time. And there's lots and lots and lots of different pathways now into construction. But the route that I took was to go to university and study civil and structural engineering. Just before I started, I was really fortunate to get awarded an IC scholarship through Quest, which so the IC is the Institution of Civil Engineers, and that was really useful for me because it was a bit of cash, a bit to support me whilst I was a student, but also it linked me with Galliford Try, so that during my summers I could go and work on our construction projects. And that was really cool because I kind of was learning the theory at university, and then I could go and then understand how that theory becomes reality and how we actually deliver construction projects during my summer. So I was on a road project. I worked at Manchester Airport, and I also worked in our design office too. Then upon finishing university, I mean, I guess the last thing to kind of flag on that is my dissertation was around carbon sequestration in concrete, so how we can effectively lock carbon dioxide into concrete so that it doesn't sit in the atmosphere and reduce the kind of greenhouse gas effect that I'm sure you'll be aware of, and how that contributes to climate change. Then I started my career at Galliford Try as a graduate design engineer, and that was predominantly around temporary works design. So temporary works, for those who don't know, is anything that we need to enable us to build things. So a good example is a bridge. We need if we're installing a bridge, we need a crane. If it's a prefabricated bridge, we need a crane to lift that bridge into place, and then somebody needs to do an assessment on the ground conditions to ensure that the bridge, ensure that the crane isn't going to fall over. And that was my job, it was to do the design, do the numbers, do the calculations to ensure that our temporary works was acceptable. I then progressed through my career. I did a placement out on site, which was really, really good fun for 7 months. And then I went and moved to Balfour Beatty, where I worked in their rail team as a senior engineer, but again, still focused on temporary works. And again, that was really good fun and very different to all my experiences earlier on in my career. And then a couple of years after that, I got the opportunity to come back to Galliford Try as a carbon manager, and this was a bit of a step change, a bit of a career change for me from what I was doing previously. But it kind of spoke to my passions. So I'm really passionate, engaged about net zero and how we can, as civil engineers, contribute to net zero, and it kind of spoke to kind of a few things I did at uni. So it was a nice, a fresh change. And I think that's one of the other things about civil engineering is it's an incredibly broad discipline. So if you love calculations and crunching numbers, and that is great for that, but also if you like working in a project team and delivering and working with people and engaging, then it's a really good career as well. So again, my kind of career demonstrates that there's lots and lots of different opportunities out there in construction around civil engineering, and you don't feel like you're being pigeonholed into anything. So that's what I'm currently doing at the moment. I'm currently the carbon manager at Galliford Try, and that kind of has two things really about what that means. So firstly, I provide leadership in the business around net zero and how we can steer towards net zero. And then the second function is around creating the right conditions for our project teams to enable them to make the right decisions to support decarbonising our construction projects. But I guess a few kind of key achievements for me. First was my last project I worked on before I left Balfour Beatty. I led the temporary works design and the Cat 3 checking for a bridge called the Newnham Viaduct that was reconstructed in April 2023. Now this bridge, it had collapsed, and it was a really sort of sudden collapse of the south abutment, which meant that the rail line had to close, and that was a really big problem because this is a really, really important rail line. So we had to really quickly mobilize and reconstruct this, and this type of project would have taken usually like 2 to 3 years, but because it was such a high emergency operation, we had 8 weeks to reconstruct the bridge, and we managed to reopen the line within 8 weeks, which is a fantastic achievement for the project and a real sort of career highlight for me. And then the second piece is around the work that I do around carbon reduction, and I published various pieces of guidance, and one of these is on the screen here is a guidance note that I wrote for the Temporary Works Forum around the embodied carbon in temporary works. So yeah, like I said, what I currently do now is about creating the governance systems, creating those right conditions for project teams to decarbonize, and it kind of combines my love for maths and numbers and doing all the kind of carbon accounting that we need to do to track our progress, but also working with people, working with our supply chain, looking at new exciting technologies that we're gonna use to drive to net zero. So I guess just to kind of close out for me, I think civil engineering is the best job in the world, and I've kind of laid out a few reasons why I think that that's the case. Firstly, like I said earlier, there's a really diverse sort of career paths and roles and opportunities to access the industry, and it gives us in civil engineering, it gives us an opportunity to solve really global challenges and leave a lasting legacy. So all of the construction projects that I've worked on during my sort of relatively short career of 10 years, those things that I've built and created are still there now. I can still go see them. You know, we've created bridges and dams and viaducts and things like that, and I can go and go and see those things, which is, I think, really cool. Plus also the infrastructure as society, we rely on these things. We, if we want to go see our family or friends, or go and do leisure things, we jump in the car, we drive where we need to go, or we jump on a train and we travel there. Or if we, brushing your teeth in the morning, we turn the tap on and water comes out, and that's because of all the hard work civil engineers do. So I think we generally make people's lives better, which I really enjoy. And then the last and probably most important for me and the work I do at the moment is I'm working really hard so that we can avoid a climate disaster. And I think construction, we're really uniquely positioned because we emit a lot of carbon, and which means that we have the opportunity to decarbonize and make a really positive contribution to net zero in the UK. So I've got a few numbers on the screen to kind of prove that. So if you kind of think about what your carbon emissions might look like. So a one-way flight from London to New York might cost you about 0.8 tons. Your personal carbon footprint last year, probably around 5.5 tons, something like that. But if you enter the construction industry, and the fact that I work in the construction industry, my professional carbon footprint shoots up to 18 tons. And if we consider whole life, which is all the carbon that is emitted whilst we're using all these assets that we're creating, then that number jumps up to 68 tons per year. So I can be the most carbon conscious and eco-friendly person in the world in my personal life, and do all the great things that we should all be doing, like recycling and eating less meat and all these kind of things. But actually, the real opportunity for me working in the construction industry is by really working hard in the work and the decisions that I make at work to decarbonize. So that was a bit of a breeze through, but I guess just for kind of my sort of pie and advice for yourselves is when you're looking at what kind of careers you might want to get involved with, I'd say look for scholarships. It really helped me. That financial support really helped me, but also the connection that it made with Galliford Try has led to a sort of lifelong career here, which has been wonderful, and had some really great experiences whilst I was studying and then getting into the industry. The second piece is around getting industry experience, getting out there, seeing what the world is like. You feel like you're making a really big decision, and it is a big decision, but ultimately there's no substitute for experience. And I could sell you the dream of what construction looks like, but until you're out there muddy with your boots on the ground, you won't necessarily know what it feels like and what it is. So I'd say any opportunity you can get for a bit of work experience would be wonderful. And then have a look at the different routes into the profession. So like I said, I work for a contractor, but you can see here I'm sat here today in a nice sort of office. So I guess that speaks to there's various different roles that we have in construction, but also various different routes in. So apprenticeships is a really big driver for us at the moment, and we're seeing a lot more engineers coming through that are doing apprenticeships as opposed to the traditional sort of university route. And like I said, that's kind of echo that last point there. Civil engineering is a very broad sort of career, and there's lots and lots of different things that you can do. So yeah, that's everything I want to say. Thank you very much for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Luke, for sharing everything that you're passionate about. It's really, really important. So thank you. There are a couple of questions. One of the things that people have asked is, how does Galliford Try kind of get a job? I suppose, who is your customer, if that makes sense? I think it's
really
because
good.
you see
Yeah,
a bridge that's broke and think, oh, I'll
absolutely.
rock up and fix that. Or what does that look like?
Absolutely, that's a really, really good question. That's a real big challenge for me that I didn't really have a good understanding of. So who employs us? So that can be lots and lots and lots of different organisations. So it's usually in some form or other the government. So we have kind of two sets of clients. We either have public clients or we have private clients. So if we think about, so I build roads, we potentially could have in the private sector, we would have a house builder that would go and buy a plot of land and build a load of houses, but they'd need infrastructure to connect those houses to the main road network. So we would come and build the road and the supporting infrastructure and install all the drainage and all the water connections to that private to that house to that to that new area of housing.
Mhm.
So that's kind of private, and then public is then everything that comes from the government, and really all the funding and to build the infrastructure comes from the government in one way or another, and it comes through various different sort of organizations and lots of tiers. So for example, the strategic road network, so the motorways and the major roads, are owned and operated by National Highways, and we are employed by National Highways to um, uh, create and maintain and enhance their strategic road network. And you work, things like the Environment Agency, National Grid, so all these kind of organizations that you may have heard of, but you might not necessarily know what they do. A lot of their funding comes from the government. And ultimately, it's our taxes that fund the government, and that's how the money flows through. So we're all, infrastructure benefits us all. Hopefully that
Perfect.
makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And I suppose thinking about it, sort of public sector and private sector. So when young people are thinking about careers with government or things like that, we're quite impactful there. There's another question that says, well, what methods do you use for power to try and minimize
Absolutely.
your carbon footprints?
Yeah, that's another really great question. That's something that we're tackling at the moment. So for us, when we're thinking about a construction project, and how we operate as a company, as an organization, we kind of have we basically have our direct influence on what we can directly influence, and that is mostly around the diesel and the electricity that we use to power our projects. And then we think about then that as kind of things that we have indirect influence over. So the steel and the concrete and all the things that we use to build that project are manufactured by other organizations that we buy those materials from. So there's a really big proportion of our carbon emissions comes from those materials, but we have less influence over how we decarbonize those. Whereas for the fuel that we use, we definitely have more influence there. So what we do is we're looking at really exciting technologies like hydrogen. So hydrogen is an alternative fuel, and if that is produced in a green way, then we can use that in our construction projects. We also use so we're electrifying our fleet, so the cars that we use are all electric vehicles, but also the construction equipment as well. So the excavators and the dump trucks and all those things are being electrified as opposed to diesel powered, and that's really powerful because then as our national grid decarbonizes, our use and how we construct our projects will also decarbonize. So yeah, hydrogen, electricity, and then we use something called HVO, hydro treated vegetable oil, which is, if you look at the McDonald's and you'll see their big heavy goods vehicles, they'll have biodiesel, and that comes from their chip fat fryers. The waste there goes into their HGVs. We use HVO as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. Something that I'm always asked, and a school's asked it actually in the chat, is if we talk about civil engineering, it's a really attractive job role. We're very much asked about it when we're out and about.
Cool.
Do you use AI currently in your role? Do you see it impacting the world of civil engineers? A lot of young students are concerned about the longevity of some careers.
Absolutely. And it was funny because when I was picking my career, which was, I guess, 10, 12 years ago, something like that, we had lots of new job titles that didn't exist 100 years ago. So there was lots of influencers and digital market content creators and all these kind of jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago, 10 years before I was looking. And we kind of thought, oh, there's all these exciting opportunities. Are they kind of good careers to pick, or are those jobs going to exist in 10 years time, or are we going to kind of disappear as quickly as they've come? Whereas the sort of the theory I took was, well, we've had civil engineers for 150 years. We're going to need civil engineers for the rest of time, because we're always going to need infrastructure as human beings to connect and to live. I think AI has been very disruptive, and it's going to continue to become more and more disruptive. I'm using AI every single day for various different tasks, and the idea is to make my job and my role more efficient. So AI is not going to be able to replace me yet, touch wood, but it enables me to be more efficient and to do more with the time that I've got available. So it means that I do less administrative tasks and spend more time actually thinking and connecting with people. So it's really interesting that traditionally as civil engineers, the focus was on those hard engineering sort of skills around mathematics and calculation and standards and design. And I think as AI kind of is able to replicate that work, we'll need to be able to have oversight still as engineers, but also we'll then be more reliant on those traditionally softer skills around working together and collaborating. So we will always need engineers, and we will always need civil engineers. It's just the work that we do may be quite different to the work that we've done historically. And I guess the last kind of thing to kind of say on that is AI is a tool, and we use tools in construction and engineering. We have them for a long time, and there was people were very worried when pocket calculators came in, and we use a lot of digital tools in design, and the information is only as good as the information you put in is only as good as the information you get out. And whilst I was at university, all our lecturers were saying to us that we were going to be coding and we weren't going to be engineering and we were never going to touch pen and paper anymore. And then I kind of got out into the real world, and we were still doing calculations by hand and still very much in the sort of the muck and the bullets. So I'd say that it is going to be disruptive. There's no doubt about it. But I think my personal view is civil engineering is a really safe bet if you want to protect yourself against AI and being sort of automated.
I love that about the pocket calculator,
Yeah,
things like
absolutely.
that. Different generations have all had different tools that have impacted their futures, haven't they?
Absolutely.
Just another couple, there's two more questions, so we'll just get that through those at the top of half an hour. Thank you so much. What A levels or B techs would be most beneficial, do you think, for a choice as a year 11 thinking about a career in civil engineering? Everybody always says maths. Is it essential?
I think it's becoming, like I said, it's becoming probably a little bit less essential. And like I said, engineering is a really broad church. There's lots of different careers that we can have as civil engineers. So some people will favour maths and physics, and those are really good options to take if you want to be really super technical and get into maybe design. But then if you look at kind of the world I'm in contracting, I'd have to guess that a lot of our site engineers, they kind of rarely pick up a calculator or really rarely do calculations, because their role is predominantly around ensuring that we deliver our projects in a health and safety sort of state, and that they do a lot of like logistics and kind of management of people and operations and things like that. So they're less sort of technical focused, which means that maths is less essential. Or when I was at university and school, I had to work really hard with maths because it wasn't kind of I wasn't naturally sort of gifted with it. And I would say it's becoming less and less of a barrier. I think if you sort of say 10, 15 years ago, they'd say absolutely maths and physics is essential. But I think it's becoming less and less important, like I said, as we rely more on our softer skills as engineers. So yeah, I'd sort of say those are still comfortable and safe, but equally that doesn't necessarily preclude you from joining the profession if you don't have those A levels or B techs around maths.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody's asked a question, as Galliford Try, do you see an apprenticeship degree as valuable as a university degree? I suppose that comes really from a bit of a myth that people think that apprenticeship degrees aren't as, I don't know,
Absolutely.
highly
Yeah, absolutely.
regarded as a uni
Yeah,
degree, but
absolutely. I think so our apprenticeship program is really strong and really thriving and kicking out some really fantastic engineers. And if we look across my business, we can't differentiate between who has done an apprenticeship degree and who has done a traditional degree. It's not something that is kind of known, or it's not sort of it doesn't hamper your career progression at all. And really, if anything, it's a really attractive proposition from a point of view of you're not being lumbered with this massive amount of debt, but also you get to go into the industry at a younger age, and you get to be exposed to more wider experiences that are very specific to your role. So we have a lot of we have like a trainee site engineer. They'll go through their degree apprenticeship. So I mean, it sounds, on the one hand it sounds really fantastic, but on the other hand it sounds quite tough in some ways. My approach was very linear, so I did my 4 years of study, and then I went out and did my graduate role and carried on, and then progressed through to chartship. Whereas our trainee engineers will we'll work on in our projects and in our businesses, and then do their study alongside, and then they'll do their chartership towards the end of their study once they've completed their degree apprenticeship. So hard work, but very attractive as well. So, but in terms of differentiation, there is no differentiation for us as an organisation.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. And like you say, there's pros and cons for both, isn't there?
Sure.
Financials, experience, all sorts of
Yeah,
things. It's down to the
absolutely.
individual learners quite often.
Yeah.
And then finally, a good one to finish on is, do you think we can ever achieve net zero in construction?
Yes.
It's a big
Yeah, really.
question.
Yeah. No, I get asked this all the time, and and sometimes I'm feeling really optimistic, and other times I'm feeling a bit down. The point to make is a lot of our clients and ourselves, we've set really ambitious net zero targets. So whilst the UK has set a target for net zero by 2050, we actually need to achieve net zero by 2040. So 10 years earlier than the rest of society. So we've got some really big challenges ahead, and we've got some really difficult things to decarbonize. So steel
That's
and
14
concrete.
years.
I know, and and 2030 is a kind of, we have interim targets by 2030 and specific things we need to do. So by 2030 we need to be diesel free. So we need to be completely stop using diesel altogether. So like I said, we have a lot of priority, a lot of focus at the moment on those alternative fuels in terms of electricity and hydrogen and HVO as a transition. So there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do, and I am really busy. I'm probably I'd say probably one of the most busy people in our organisation, because we've got a lot way to go. But I'm really confident we'll do it. That all the technology is there. We just need to get that technology and get it to the people, get it out to the people, and make sure that the economics make sense. But yeah, we're making some really good progress. So yeah, I think we can do it.
Well, thank you so much for giving up your time today, as you're so busy. And I suppose really thinking about that, is a great amount of opportunity and career pathways
Absolutely.
available over the next sort of 14, 20 years in your sector for young people that are really worried about or considering a role in sustainability and that sort of thing. So thank you for sharing that with us, and many thanks. And thanks. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll log off.
Thank you.